There is a version of you that never got to exist. Not because it was wrong, but because it was inconvenient, misunderstood, or too much for others. Carl Jung believed that when we suppress who we truly are, that personality doesn't disappear. It waits. And it quietly shapes our anxiety, our choices, and our relationships. If any part of this feels uncomfortable, stay with this video, because that discomfort is not random. There is a version of you that never fully got to exist. Not because it was wrong. Not because it was weak. But because at some point, it became unsafe to be fully yourself. Carl Jung believed that every human being is born with a natural psychological orientation, a personality that wants to unfold, express itself, and mature over time. But very early in life, most people learn that certain traits are welcome, while others are not. So adaptation begins. And slowly, quietly, a split forms. You keep the parts of yourself that bring acceptance. And you suppress the parts that bring discomfort, rejection, or misunderstanding. This is not a conscious decision. It is survival. You might recognize this if, growing up, you were told you were too sensitive, too loud, too quiet, too emotional, too intense, too imaginative, too independent. Each message, even subtle ones, taught you something important. To belong, you must edit yourself. Jung called the parts of the personality that are pushed out of awareness the shadow. Not because they are dark or bad, but because they are unseen. The shadow contains everything you learn not to be. And often, it also contains who you were meant to become. The personality you were meant to become is not something you need to invent. It already existed. It simply learned to hide. Many people go through life feeling vaguely disconnected from themselves without knowing why. They function. They succeed. They adapt. But something feels missing. This sense of absence often has nothing to do with motivation or confidence. It comes from living too long in a personality shaped by expectations rather than truth. You might recognize this pattern if you feel like you're playing a role in your life. If you know how to behave, but not how to feel fully alive. If you feel drained after social interactions, even when nothing went wrong. This is the cost of suppression. When you suppress parts of your personality, you don't just lose expression. You lose energy. Jung believed that psychic energy flows toward what is authentic. When authenticity is blocked, energy turns inward, often becoming anxiety, numbness, or chronic dissatisfaction. Another sign of a suppressed personality is envy. Not the obvious kind, but quiet fascination. You might find yourself deeply drawn to certain people. People who express traits you admire but don't allow yourself to embody. They speak freely. They take up space. They rest without guilt. They create without apology. This attraction is not random. Jung saw envy and admiration as signals from the unconscious. They point to disowned parts of the self. If someone's way of being fascinates or irritates you, it often reflects a trait you were once discouraged from expressing. The personality you were meant to become is still alive, but it may be living through projection. Louise Hay approached this from the perspective of self-acceptance. She believed that when we reject parts of ourselves, life mirrors that rejection back to us. If you learn to suppress your voice, you may feel unseen. If you learn to suppress your needs, you may feel unsupported. If you learn to suppress your authenticity, you may feel disconnected from meaning. This suppression often begins very early. Children are intuitive. They notice quickly what is rewarded and what is punished. If you are praised for being quiet, helpful, or mature, you may have learned to suppress playfulness, anger, or neediness. If you were praised for achievement, you may have learned to suppress rest, softness, or vulnerability. Over time, these adaptations solidify into a personality structure. You become reliable, capable, strong. But the cost is subtle. The personality you present to the world is not false. It is incomplete. Jung emphasized that psychological health is not about perfection. It is about wholeness. Wholeness requires integrating what was split off. Many adults feel lost not because they lack direction, but because they have been living from a narrowed version of themselves. You might recognize this if you feel unsure who you are without roles, without productivity, without expectations. Silence feels uncomfortable. Rest feels unearned. Expression feels risky. These are signs of a suppressed self. Another common indicator is chronic self-doubt. When you suppress your authentic impulses long enough, you stop trusting your inner signals. You second-guess decisions. You look outward for validation. You hesitate even when you know. This is not lack of confidence. It is lack of permission. The personality you were meant to become needed permission to exist. Jung believed that the psyche will eventually demand integration. What is suppressed does not disappear. It waits. And when ignored for too long, it often emerges as crisis. Burnout, depression, midlife confusion, a sudden urge to change everything. These moments are not failures. They are messages. They signal that the suppressed parts are asking to be seen. Louise Hay would describe this as the body and mind calling for alignment. When you live too far from your authentic self, life becomes heavy. The good news is that the suppressed personality is not gone. It is dormant. And awakening it does not require abandoning your life. It requires listening. One way to begin is to notice what drains you versus what energizes you. Suppressed traits consume energy. Authentic traits generate it. Pay attention to moments when you feel most like yourself. Moments of ease. Moments of flow. Moments when time disappears. These are clues. Another path is to reflect on who you were before you learned to adapt. What did you love as a child before it was evaluated? How did you express yourself before you were corrected? Jung believed that the child carries the blueprint of the self. Not the behavior, but the essence. Recovery is not regression. It is remembering. You may also notice resistance. Fear of being judged. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being too much or not enough. These fears are echoes of the past. They belong to an earlier environment. The personality you were meant to become does not need universal approval. It needs internal permission. Louise Hay emphasized affirmations not as positive thinking, but as repatterning. Statements like, "It is safe for me to be myself. I honor all parts of who I am. I no longer need to shrink to belong." These are not affirmations to convince the mind. They are signals to the nervous system. Integration happens slowly. You don't reclaim your personality all at once. You do it in moments. Speaking when you would normally stay silent. Resting when you would normally push. Choosing honesty over approval. Each small act builds trust with yourself. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, is the central task of human life. It is not selfish. It is necessary. A suppressed personality does not disappear. It waits. And when it is finally allowed to emerge, it brings vitality, meaning, and a sense of inner alignment that no external success can replace. The personality you were meant to become is not an ideal version of you. It is a fuller one. One that includes strength and softness, expression and restraint, logic and intuition. You were never meant to be one-dimensional. You were meant to be whole. And the moment you begin allowing that suppressed self to breathe, life begins to feel different. Not easier, but truer. Because you are no longer living as who you learned to be. You are becoming who you always were. Another sign of a suppressed personality is the feeling of being chronically misunderstood. Not necessarily in dramatic ways, but in subtle ones. You may feel that people see only a surface version of you. That conversation stays shallow, even when you long for depth. That you are appreciated for what you do, but not truly known for who you are. If this sounds familiar, it's often because the most authentic parts of you learn to stay hidden early on. When expression once led to rejection or confusion, the psyche adapts by minimizing risk. You show what feels acceptable. You hold back what feels vulnerable or unconventional. Jung believed that the psyche prioritizes survival before authenticity. Belonging comes first. Self-expression comes later, if at all. This is why many adults feel a quiet grief they can't explain. They are mourning a version of themselves that never had space to fully exist. Another place where the suppressed personality shows itself is in chronic indecision. When you've spent years adapting to expectations, you lose touch with your inner compass. You learn to scan the environment instead of listening inward. You ask, what should I do? What makes sense? What will be accepted? Instead of, what feels right to me? What aligns with who I am? This disconnection from inner authority creates anxiety. Not because you are incapable, but because your true self has not been consulted in a long time. Jung referred to this as living from the persona. The persona is the social mask. It's the role you learn to play to function in the world. The persona is not bad. It is necessary. But when the persona becomes the only place you live from, the soul feels compressed. You might recognize this if you feel relief when you are alone, not because you dislike people, but because you can finally drop the mask. Silence feels like oxygen. Solitude feels like truth. This is not introversion alone. It is the self-exhaling. Another common outcome of personality suppression is creative blockage. Creativity is not limited to art. It is the ability to respond to life authentically. When your authentic impulses are repeatedly suppressed, creativity narrows. Life begins to feel repetitive, predictable, flat. Jung believed creativity was a direct expression of the unconscious seeking dialogue with consciousness. When that dialogue is blocked, stagnation follows. Louise Hay would say that joy is a natural state that returns when self-acceptance is restored. If you struggle to feel joy, it may not be because life is lacking, but because parts of you are still waiting for permission. You might also notice a pattern of emotional intensity in private. Outwardly, you appear composed, capable, controlled. Inwardly, emotions feel overwhelming. This happens when feelings were not welcomed earlier in life. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They accumulate. They may emerge as sudden anger, tears without a clear cause, or emotional exhaustion. This is not weakness. It is backlog. The personality you were meant to become included emotional expression. When that expression is delayed, it comes out sideways. Another subtle sign is attraction to extremes. You may oscillate between restraint and impulsivity, control and collapse. This is the psyche compensating. When one side is suppressed for too long, the opposite demands expression. Jung saw this as the psyche seeking balance. Integration is not about swinging to the other extreme. It is about allowing range. Allowing yourself to be serious and playful, strong and soft, contained and expressive. The personality you were meant to become was never meant to be rigid. It was meant to breathe. A powerful step toward reclaiming that personality is grieving what was lost. This is often overlooked. You may need to grieve the version of yourself that was misunderstood, the expression that was silenced, the curiosity that was discouraged. Grief is not indulgence. It is acknowledgement. Louise Hay emphasized compassion as the foundation of healing. You cannot shame yourself back into wholeness. You must meet the suppressed parts with kindness. Another practical way to reconnect is experimentation. Not dramatic life changes, but small acts of honesty. Say what you actually think in a safe moment. Choose what you want without justification. Express a preference without apology. Notice how your body responds. Relief is a signal. So is fear. Fear does not mean danger. It often means unfamiliarity. Jung believed fear often guards the doorway to growth. The more you allow these small expressions, the more the nervous system recalibrates. Safety expands. The personality you were meant to become begins to feel less risky. You also begin to notice changes in your relationships. Some people respond positively. Others feel unsettled. This is natural. When you stop suppressing yourself, dynamics shift. Not everyone benefits from your authenticity, but you do. And those who resonate with your fuller self tend to stay. Another profound shift happens internally. You begin to trust yourself again. Decisions feel clearer. Energy returns. Motivation becomes intrinsic rather than forced. This is not because life becomes perfect, but because it becomes aligned. Jung believed that alignment between the conscious and unconscious brings vitality. When you live closer to your authentic personality, less energy is spent maintaining a facade. Life feels lighter, even when it's challenging. The personality you were meant to become was not meant to impress. It was meant to express. It was not meant to be palatable to everyone. It was meant to be true. Reclaiming it is not rebellion. It is remembrance. And the more you allow that suppressed self to exist, imperfectly, gradually, honestly, the more life begins to respond. Not with applause, but with a quiet sense of rightness. And that feeling is unmistakable. Because you are no longer living as a survival strategy. You are living as a whole human being.
If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more gentle reminders of your inner power.